Susan, break down how wild what we're talking about this in terms of this situation, hearing that top officials included a magazine editor in a group chat that was discussing secret military plans.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Veep came back to life as a real-life Trump administration reality show drama today. And even then, by the way, had we pitched this plot to the screenwriters, they would have said, no way, come on, that's too insane, even by the standards of fiction. OK, this is crazier than fiction. And it's also just so much more revealing, I think, about where we're at 9 weeks to the day into this second Trump administration. The same people who wanted to throw Hillary Clinton in jail for using a private email server are the same people texting each other apparently classified war plan information. I think Jeff Goldberg, it strikes me that he handled this as responsibly as you could while thinking that it was a hoax, because how could it possibly be real? As soon as he realized, according to his account, that the strikes against the Houthis that he had read about on this text chain were exactly happening when the text chain said that it would, that's when he signed out of it. Really struck by the incredibly intemperate comments by the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that you showed in the introduction today, Charles. In contrast to the responsibility of the magazine editor, the idea that the Defense Secretary of the United States, having already shared this secret, top secret information about our war plans over an unsecure chat app with a journalist, that he would attack the journalist for being fake news, I think tells you everything about where we are as a society. It's a pretty shocking thing. And the question I have is whether any Republicans on Capitol Hill who voted for this man just a few weeks ago to be defense secretary, whether they're going to even try to call him to account for this kind of reckless behavior.
David, Susan raises a very good point. Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor of The Atlantic, handled this very responsibly, but it raises a ton of other questions. Are there other threads? Are there other people who've just sort of sat in silence while on similar threads that are now running around with national secrets? Jeffrey Goldberg was actually on with Jen Psaki on her show tonight, and he responded to Pete Hegseth. Here's what he had to say. Let's take a listen.
The specific time of a future attack, specific targets, including human targets, meant to be killed in that attack, weapons systems, even weather reports, that the government is I don't know why Hegseth was sharing it with everybody. I mean, the precise detail, and then a long section on sequencing. This is going to happen, then that is going to happen. I've been, asked this question a few times today. It's why did you have such a hard time believing this? Mm-hmm. And the answer is because it's unbelievable.
David, is the word unbelievable? Is that really the word? And is this more of an embarrassment to the Trump administration that it happened, or is the concern what else is out there that we don't know about?
Well, let's just deal with what we know. And I think it is rather unbelievable. There's been a lot of focus on the fact that Jeffrey Goldberg was included on this chat accidentally. First of all, in reference to the Secretary of Defense's comments, he's neither deceitful nor discredited. He's a pretty good journalist. I don't, throw on compliments like that lightly. But I don't really care that a journalist was included on this. The fact that senior U.S. government officials, as senior as the vice president and the White House chief of staff and the Secretary of Defense, the CIA director and the director of national intelligence, were having this discussion on a commercial chat platform is what should be concerning and what deserves the focus, not the fact that they accidentally included a journalist that allowed us to be aware of this. Our enemies and our adversaries are good enough at hacking our secure government systems, so-called secure government systems, that we don't need to make it easier for them. And it wasn't just that they were having a philosophical discussion about how to handle the Houthis. who have been disrupting shipping channels and making it difficult for the West to transport goods around the world. And what should be done about that? They disclosed very specific war plans, times, places, methods, to the point where Goldberg declined to detail all of it in his reporting because it would compromise U.S. national security. When Republicans over the past 10 years have referenced Hillary Clinton's private email server while she was Secretary of State and said that it endangered U.S. national security because it was moving information off of secure government platforms, they were right. And this is no different. Secondarily, U.S. Government communications under the Presidential Records Act are supposed to be preserved, and platforms like Signal are designed to not preserve things, to put it plainly. And if low-level government officials or members of the military had done this, they would be fired and possibly prosecuted. That's what usually happens when you're a low-level government official who does this. In fact, private sector corporate officials who do business with the U.S. government that inadvertently disclose U.S. Proprietary or classified information on non-secure platforms also are subject to firing by their employers. And so this is very serious. The fact that Jeffrey Goldberg was included inadvertently in the chat is really beside the point.
You know, we cannot ignore the irony here that Pete Hegseth has been the one to talk and make a hallmark out of both meritocracy and competence, and we are not seeing either of that in this situation. Barbara, David sort of talked about this with respect to a lower-level employee would have been dismissed for something like this. You know what time it is. I'm taking off the glasses. I'm talking to a lawyer, Barbara. Is there any chance that the law was broken here in terms of what was shared? And does something like this potentially undermine this administration's own credibility when it comes to actually prosecuting folks around issues of national security breaches?
Absolutely. It appears first that the Federal Records Act has been violated here by using a private app for messaging as opposed to official government channels. The reason we have a Federal Records Act is to keep track of what is communicated, to have a record of those things. So simply using a private device or a private signal chat alone is prohibited. But something even more serious than that is this is a potential violation of the Espionage Act. I know the term Espionage Act suggests that there's spying involved, but it also relates to the protection of classified information and national defense information. So even if this information were not classified at the secret or top secret level, we know it pertains to the national defense. And the Espionage Act makes it a crime for someone who has lawful access to national defense information to disclose it to someone who does not have authorized access to that information through gross negligence. Now, Barbara, I would submit that, number one, using Signal alone is gross negligence, but adding a journalist is even more gross negligence.
Now, Barbara, you're a DOJ vet. What's the likelihood that we see Pam Bondi actually investigate that and determine whether the Espionage Act was in fact violated?
I would say in any other administration, I think that there would be a strong likelihood of that. I think when it comes to Pam Bondi, based on some of the things that she has said and her loyalty to Trump in this administration, I'd be very surprised if we do see an investigation.
Susan, I was just talking about the notion of meritocracy and the importance of competence and merit, and that's something that we've heard a lot from President Trump, Elon Musk, and Pete Hegseth about. I want to play something and get your reaction on the other side.
This is a big deal, merit. Our country is going to be based on merit again. Can you believe it?
I think it's what the president mentioned earlier, which is that in order to save taxpayer money, it comes down to two things: competence and caring.
We believe that whether you are a doctor, an accountant, a lawyer, or an air traffic controller, you should be hired and promoted based on skill and competence, not race or gender. Very important.
Talk about things that did not age well. Susan, what does it say if the Trump administration does not seek to issue some sort of public rebuke or discipline of either Hegseth and or Walz in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's talk about this in a real way. Pete Hegseth was not chosen for his skill, competence, resume, background, experience. His predecessor, who they've denigrated in the job, Lloyd Austin, was a former 4-star general in the United States military. Pete Hegseth was a National Guard lower level official who ran a couple of small nonprofits before being a weekend television anchor on Fox News. And he has been inveighing about DEI and competence and skills. And I think it's an example of how, in many ways, the Trump administration has been gaslighting America. They've been busy undertaking essentially a culture war on what Hegseth and Trump called the enemy within. Donald Trump in his campaign, in an interview in October before the election, he said there's Russia, there's China, those are our adversaries, but the bigger adversary is the enemy within. And the enemy that they've been doing is purging the Pentagon's websites of words like women in combat, of the Enola Gay, because the word gay or something. And, I think that this incident with the signal chain of all of the entire top national security leadership of our country, it's the kind of thing that I don't expect it will shock the Trump administration into acting differently, but it is a marker of how far we've come, that we don't even expect that there's going to be a special prosecutor appointed for this. We don't expect congressional hearings. It's the degradation of our system that we can't even police ourselves and hold our top national security officials accountable for following the rules that they expect others to follow.